Ladies and gentlemen, Dennis R. MacDonald has been ignored enough. Dr. MacDonald has talked to me privately when I was there in California with him and Dr. Richard Carrier about these topics. And a lot of the scholars out there that even don't accept his materials, his ideas, still say, well, we don't believe it's mimesis, but sure, it may have influence because the culture around them in the Greco-Roman world had the Greek epics, the Iliad, the Odyssey. There were plays about these things. The Aeneid, Euripides the Bacchae with Dionysus, etc. Now ask yourself this question. It's in the air, and the authors knew Greek, which was the learning process in which they'd learn Greek, knowing the Iliad and the Odyssey. These were things they had to know. This is how they learned to learn Greek. Now, why aren't there any commentaries out there that specifically deal with the pericopes and show and say, this has its parallels over here in the Greek epics? No, they only go to the Hebrew Bible. So what you're going to find in this video, you're not going to find anywhere else. Ladies and gentlemen, real quick as an introduction, many scholars have scoffed, neglected, rejected, refused to even consider Dennis MacDonald's work. So today I have Dr. MacDonald taking us into an example that is almost so obvious that cognitive dissonance is the only thing you could do to say why they reject.
To get out of it, yeah.
To get out of this. And
right.
We have Dr. Richard Carrier joining us, of course, and Dr. Carrier, he's mentioned and even defends a lot of Dennis's ideas. He doesn't obviously conclude everything, but like in so many ways, when a scholar says, oh, Dennis MacDonald, you might want to rethink that and consider what we do today.
Yeah.
I want to take the example of the famous story of Jesus being anointed for his embalming before his death in the Gospel of Mark and in other synopsis, and also in also has a version in the Gospel of John. I'm reading from the synopsis that I have of the Gospels, a mimetic synopsis, which includes parallels to classical Greek poetry and to the Bible, the Septuagint as well. So my colleagues and I are going to be reading from the text, and then along the way we're going to talk about them. And I think there really can't be any doubt that this text is mimetic of Homer. That doesn't mean that it justifies all the mimesis that I propose, but in this case I think it's inescapable. And by the way, we're going to see that it was recognized by ancient readers. So this reading is congenial to the reading of the Gospels in Byzantium. So here we go. The woman who anoints Jesus for his burial in Mark surely imitates the famous Homeric niptra, or washing, by Eurycleia, Odysseus' nurse, who recognized the scar on his thigh while washing his feet in Odyssey 19. Here are the most relevant lines where Penelope speaks to Eurycleia about the renown that comes to those who show hospitality. Now, I'm going to read a footnote that's here because it really is important.
I was just going to ask you to do that. Yeah, right, because that's really crucial.
Fact, why don't you read the footnote, beginning with Eurycleia's recognition?
Yeah. Eurycleia's recognition generated many literary imitations, especially in Greek tragedy, where one character recognizes another by a distinctive token, which is the second criterion in this case. Examples appear in Aeschylus's Koiphori, Euripides' Electra, Sophocles' Electra, in Achilles' Tatius's Leucippe and Cleitophon, Longus's Daphnis and Chloe, and Heliodorus' Ethiopica, all novels. These are all religious novels.
Right.
Where both there's both tragedies and religious novels, where the hero identified himself by, quote unquote, a scar on his knee, and he got hunting a boar. And the Testament of Abraham, even. So here we have an example of an imitation in Jewish literature. Presents a superb example of imitation of Odyssey 19 by a Jewish author. So, yeah.
And
proof of concept.
I give those parallels in other books. But here is my translation of some relevant lines from Odyssey 19. And Derek is going to read it, and he doesn't need to read the Greek. So go ahead, Derek.
If one is noble and of noble heart, strangers carry one's fame far and wide. To all peoples, many speak of one's excellence. Then prudent Penelope said to him again, Dear stranger, never before has a man so prudent of dear strangers from afar come here to my house, so thoughtfully prudent as you are in everything that you say. I have an old woman with a wise heart in her breast, who nursed well and cherished that unlucky man. Wise Eurycleia, arise now and come, bathe this man who is the same age as your Lord. And the old woman took the gleaming basin to wash his feet, and poured into it lots of cold water, and then drew the hot. But Odysseus sat at the fireplace. So she approached and began to wash her lord. Immediately she recognized the scar that a boar long ago had gouged with a white tusk. After touching Odysseus's beard, she said, You most surely are Odysseus, dear child. I did not recognize you before, not until I touched the whole body of my lord.
Later, she anointed him richly with oil. Now, the recognition of Odysseus by his scar is also the model for the recognition of the risen Jesus by his wounds in the Gospel of Luke, and then more extravagantly in the Gospel of John with the Doubting Thomas episode. Now, the phrase, strangers carry one's fame far and wide, is these two words, kleos, uru, far and wide fame. And we're going to talk about that as an important intertextual clue that Mark is dropping. By the way, Mark is not trying to disguise his imitation. He's advertising his imitation and wants to show that the episode about Jesus is actually superior to the one in Homer. This is not plagiarism. It's emulation. It's rivalry with Homer. And my work often is mistaken to be plagiaristic. And I'm not accusing these authors of plagiarism. I understand what they're doing as art. Any comment to that?
No, that's spot on. And anybody who's, us classicists, people who've been in classics and ancient history, know this. This is common. This is the whole literary milieu in which this stuff was created. Everybody was doing this. Everybody accepted it. Everybody admired it as a process. And in fact, we're specifically taught it. This is the skill you were specifically taught to do. And so therefore, all the authors of the Gospels would have been taught this and encouraged to do it. It's the normal way of doing things, especially constructing myths of any kind like this. So there's nothing spontaneously odd or ad hoc about what you're proposing. What you're proposing is that the Gospel authors acted like anyone else who was educated in Greek literature. So,
if I might add, just to say it in like the most basic terms, to not do this is to not create epic narrative, to be the best. I mean, that's the whole point. So, and
also, it doesn't. If you were to create something sui generis, you lose all the richness of communication that you would have had by emulation.
Exactly.
So, the point of it that you need to emulate in order to comment, right? That's all of the Gospels are doing, is they're emulating, and what they change. It's the thing I think people forget, are the changes, because they'll often say, "Oh, but look at the differences." Yeah, look at the differences. The differences are the point. So the similarities, the emulation is what's to key the reader, or at least the deep reading reader who notices, to key the reader and to know what's being compared. And then the changes are the point. They're the message.
That's
right?
exactly right.
That's how this technique is used as a method of communication. It is a language, if you think of it in those terms. So, and to emphasize again, like, this is a language that was being used by everybody at the time. It was well known and it was admired. So, for them to do it is actually exactly what you would expect.
There are characters in Odyssey 19 who are not happy about the reception of Odysseus the beggar and somebody washing his feet. And there's a slave woman named Melantho, a female slave. She earlier complained about Penelope's generosity to Odysseus the beggar. The hero then rebuked her for discrimination against the poor. And Penelope accused her of having committed a monstrous act of hospitality. The Greek phrases will be important when we look at the Gospel of Mark. As Jesus was eating, a woman carrying an expensive stone jar broke it and poured a precious ointment over his head and down his body. Apparently she had recognized what the disciples had not. namely, that soon he would die and his body would need anointing for burial. The 12 scolded her for not caring instead for the poor, the ptokos. This is the same word that's used in the Odyssey for Melantho, the rebuke of Melantho for not caring for the poor. But Jesus insisted that she committed a beautiful act, a kalan ergon, whereas in the Odyssey, Penelope says Melantho has created a mega ergon, that is an outrageous act. Same word for the act in Greek. But that
I want to emphasize that. So remind people of that Greek point again, because I want people to not miss that. The fact that the same Greek is being used is really crucial to this.
Okay, Odysseus, in disguise as a beggar, accuses Melantho of not caring for the ptochoi. And you have the same issue about the poor with the same word, ptochis. And also Penelope accuses Melantho of doing a mega ergon, that is an outrageous or a great act. And we have Jesus saying that the woman who anointed him did a kalan ergon, a good act, as opposed to a bad act.
So this is crucial. The key, the Greek lining up with the concept of what's being done to the story. This is one of many pieces of this that actually indicate that the emulation is what's happening here.
And it's not just emulation, it's advertised emulation. Mark is not disguising his use of Homer. And actually these parallels continue. The name Eurycleia means far-flung fame. And Homer punned on it in Penelope's statement to her in Odyssey 19. If one is noble and of noble heart, strangers carry one's fame far and wide. Kleos eru, reversing the words of uru kleos, to all peoples, and speak of one's excellent. Luke freely redacted Mark's account at the beginning of his transformation of the pericope peccatora that we had talked about before. Now, I'm going to ask Derek to read on page 206 the entire story in Mark, from Mark 14:3 to 9. You can make your own judgment about the parallels. So go ahead.
And while he was in Bethany, at the house of Simon the leper, and as he was reclining at dinner, a woman entered, who brought an alabaster jar of very costly ointment of pure nard. She broke the alabaster jar, and poured the ointment down over his head. But some people expressed with each other their indignation. Why this waste of ointment? This ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii, and
donated to the poor. It goes off to the next page, right? And that word poor is the same word used in the Odyssey, the ptochoi.
And they scolded her harshly. Mark, but Jesus said, let her be. Why do you trouble her? She has performed a beautiful act on my behalf, for you always have the poor with you, and when you wish, you can do good for them. But you do not always have me. She offered what she had. She anticipated the anointing of my body for burial. And I tell you truly, wherever the good news is proclaimed throughout the whole world, or through the world, what this woman has done also will be spoken of in her memory.
That is, she will have Eurycleia. She will have renown far and wide. And the reader expects, this is a flag to Eurycleia, that this woman is doing a generous act that will be remembered everywhere, just as Eurycleia's generosity would be proclaimed throughout the Greek world. Any comments?
No, I think it's beautiful.
I just think that right there alone, the name means the very phrase in which Jesus is using is a huge red flag on top of everything Carrier and you've already been
and it's
discussing.
worth showing people. I'm going to show people this. So you have the synopsis. I don't know if this will show up on video, but you can at least see the structure of the page. But he's got all of the Homeric verses, so you can actually go and check, complete with, and then we have the comparisons here, the
Synoptics.
we have again all of the passages that you would need from Homer to actually see the parallels and figure it out.
Well, in fact, it's right that those things in the footnote come from Homer, but they actually come from a Byzantine retelling of
Yes,
the
this is a
story.
good one. The bottom footnote stuff. So we have the Homer passages here, but down here in the footnote we've got
The Homerocentones.
And what is that?
These are poems. There are 5 large poems done over a period of about half a millennium, actually. Beginning in the 4th century, the first poet actually was a woman, Evdokia, the wife of Theodosius II. These texts have never been exhaustively translated in any modern language. And we've had a critical edition of them only in the last 15 years or so. And you will not find what we're going to read right now in any commentary or discussion of this text. And I think it shows clearly that these authors saw in this story echoes of the story of Odysseus, and they did not shy away from identifying those similarities and using the Homeric lines that inspired Mark to retell the Markan story. So Homer is both earlier than Mark and later than Mark when the Byzantine authors retell the story. It's really quite an amazing phenomenon.
and it's another proof of concept. Like, they saw this. So one of the criticisms of your work is like, well, why didn't they see it? Well, here, they did.
That's right.
Do you want us to read that? Or
Yes, we do. And in fact, I'll read the things that are not Homeric, and I'm going to invite Richard to read the things that are.
Where are we? We're on 205.
In footnote 32.
Okay.
The following lines from Recension 1 of the Homerocentones retell Jesus' anointing and retain the pun on the name Eurycleia. I would not.
Oh, you want me to go there? Okay. So this is from the Kentos. I would not object to a woman like this touching my feet. That's right from Odyssey. Woman, no mortal on the boundless earth would reprove you, for your renown extends to the far off. Kleos, Euron.
Yep.
To the far off sky. Like that of a faultless king who, God-fearing, rules over many valiant men, maintaining justice, and the black earth brings him as snow melted on the high mountains, snow that the Euros thawed when the Zephyros poured over it.
Let me read the transition here.
Okay, yeah,
Because here are some more imitations of the Niptra in Recension 1, and they describe the grieving mother of Jesus, the Theotokos.
Ah, I see, yeah. These are lines from Homer, ultimately. As snow melted on the high mountains, snow that the Euros thawed when the Zephyros poured over it, and as it melts the flowing rivers bulge, so her beautiful cheeks melted as she wept.
So just as Penelope weeps for her husband, the Theotokos weeps for her dead child. To comfort Mary, a divine voice came to her. By the way, all of these lines come from the Niptra, that is Odyssey 19, and I've identified them by specific lines. Some of the lines are identical, some of them are modestly changed because of the environment. To comfort Mary, a divine voice came to her with comforting words drawn especially from Odysseus' transfiguration to Telemachus and his prediction to Penelope in the Niptra.
And I will tell you another thing, and place it in your heart. Your child is safe, and will come very soon. Such a son as anyone might desire to have. Not for long will he be far from his loved ones and homeland. Surely all these things will come to pass, just as I say. You will see him. For I suppose that you will not stop, weeping, groaning, and tearful lamenting, until you lay your eyes on him. But I will give you this command, for now, go to your home at daybreak, and speak with the mighty suitors, the 11 disciples in this case, obviously.
Yeah,
Not
and
long.
I think that's enough, honestly, just for time. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Right.
But in the same footnote, Richard, toward the end, at the end of the chapter of Recension 2, after the healing, where the Markan story has the woman serve a meal, the poem strings together from Odyssey 11, 14 Homeric lines of the 16, often in the same sequence. So all of the following lines Richard's going to read come from Odyssey 19. Several of them appear in exactly the same sequence, and it's used for the retelling of the story that we have in Mark. So, for quickly mortals.
For quickly mortals grow old because of hardship. And here referring to Eurycleia. Thus the wise mother of Peter answered him, Dear stranger, never before has a man so prudent of dear strangers from afar come here to my house. So thoughtfully prudent as you are in everything that you say, while I am an old woman, a good caregiver, I will wash your feet, though I am frail. And that's originally from a Penelope line, but here it's the mother of Peter. Jesus responds, Washings of feet do not please my heart, and no woman shall touch my feet, for many nights on a wretched bed I have slept and waited for the bright-throned dawn. Unless there is an old woman, a good caregiver, who has suffered in her breast as much as I would not object to a woman like this touching my feet.
I don't know how one can deny mimesis in this example. And to deny mimesis is to say that the Byzantine authors were smoking dope.
Right.
Sorry. But we have verbal similarities that are significant. After all, the difference is Odysseus comes back never having died, and the point in the story in Mark is Jesus is going to die after his death and be triumphant. And Eurycleia recognizes that she has spiritual perception in a way that the disciples don't. They want to give the money to the poor, which is virtuous, obviously, but you don't always have Jesus. And so you also have a rebuke and so on. I mean, the parallels are just so striking that now this is the, if you will, the camel's nose under the tent, and it's not going to be long before the whole camel is under the tent. If one can grant such advertised mimesis, in this case, at a crucial point in the Christian narrative, you've got to be open to seeing such mimesis elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's worth reemphasizing for people who might not have caught it that they actually were able to completely retell the entire gospel using nothing but lines from Homer. So what is the probability that you could do that unless the original gospels were already doing that, essentially? And what they do here, of course, is they're doing it much more literally. They're much more directly. They're taking actual lines, whole lines from Homer, slight modifications here and there, but it's clear what they're doing is that will do this, that will do this, that will do this, and it all falls together, which would not probably be possible had Mark, for example, not already built all these narratives out of Homeric passages. So,
and you have analogous imitations in Greek tragedy, in Greek novels, and in a Jewish novel. So what Mark is doing here is a part of a literary tradition that is spread throughout the culture that Mark is living in.
Yep. Prior probability is high. That's how you do it. Background evidence establishes the higher prior and makes the theory easy to demonstrate.
Derek, what do you think?
I love it. I mean, and at the end of the day, like you've done in your books, and I always recommend people, you go through this chart, which I don't see it here, but it might be here where you literally are giving, rebuke, woman named far and wide. Like you do this thing, and you're trying to give them the training wheels to say, here, let me show you, like it's in your face. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
How much time do we have on the recording on this one?
Good time.
This is a perfect segue. We should throw this in here. So, and I made this point before in previous videos we've done, but so here's the thing. So like the critics of Dennis's theory will say, no, not possible. They would never do this. But they don't say that when the same thing is being done with the Septuagint, right? They're all like, oh yeah, absolutely, emulation and mimesis is happening with the Septuagint. And in my book, on the historicity of Jesus, I actually give an example. I have a whole section here on the work of Thomas Brodie, who showed that the Gospel of Luke does this same thing we're talking about Mark doing with Homer, and Luke also uses Homer, but also what he's doing, and also what Mark does, is he's doing the exact same thing, using the exact same art, the exact same technique, but using the scriptures, right, as his base text instead of Homer. And Brodie showed that Luke is just littered. It's almost like the design, one of the main goals of Luke is to mine the King's literature for the Elisha and Elijah narratives and construct stories about Jesus in which he plops Jesus into their position and then updates it to the current context and then makes some changes that represent how he wants Jesus to appear better and superior to Elijah and Elisha. And you can go through, Brodie has a whole section on it, I cited in here, where he does the kind of the same thing that we're seeing here, where he shows passage by passage by passage, every single thing. And I've got listed here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Just as examples, I have a list of 10 passages, whole stories in Luke, that Luke has reconstructed through mimesis of the King's literature. And again, this isn't something I found. This is Brodie's published this under
page 475 in your book for anybody.
Yeah, 475 and 476. But I want to there's an example, because the example, it's exactly the same things that you're talking about. So, we have I'm going to read the King's side, and then there's the Luke side. So Kings, it starts with, it happened after this, and on the Luke side, it happens afterwards. King's side, it says, at the gate of Sarepta, Elijah meets a widow. Luke, at the gate of Nain, Jesus meets a widow. Kings, another widow's son was dead. Luke, this widow's son was dead. Kings, that widow expresses a sense of her unworthiness on account of sin. Luke, a centurion whose boy Jesus had just saved from death, had just expressed a sense of his unworthiness on account of sin. Kings, Elijah compassionately bears her son up the stairs and asks the Lord why he was allowed to die. Luke, the Lord feels compassion for her and touches her son's bier, and the bearers stand still. Kings, Elijah prays to the Lord for the son's return to life. Luke, the Lord commands the boy to rise. Elijah, the boy comes to life and cries out. Luke, and he who was dead sat up and began to speak. Kings, and he gave him to his mother, literally the Greek, kai edoken auton te metri auto.
Exactly the same.
And in Luke, and he gave him to his mother, kai edoken auton te metri auto. It's the same Greek, literal, word for word. And then Kings, the widow recognizes Elijah is a man of God and that the word he speaks is the truth. Luke, the people recognize Jesus as a great prophet of God, and the word of this truth spreads everywhere.
In every book he has, the Dionysian Gospel, when you're getting into Luke and Virgil, the mythologizing Jesus, which was the beginner's guide to selling me on you. I mean, following the Gospel of Dennis on this thing, and I was blown away at just how basic, like you just did here, and you went this, and it started painting a picture. I started to believe, but then all of these scholars started making me doubt, and now I've came back to my Lord. You know what I mean?
But this parallel is absolutely essential to understanding the methodology of mimesis and readership. And it has one additional item that it doesn't appear in the parallels. That is, Jesus can raise the boy back to life better than Elijah can.
Yeah,
because he can do it himself. Elijah has to pray and ask the
right, and also like Elijah's kind of a jerk with her about this, whereas Jesus is much more compassionate.
Exactly.
So they're fixing the story. Like there's something kind of a little bit embarrassing about the Elijah story. Like he's kind of a dick, and he's weaker. It's a messier story. It doesn't contain the values they want. So they've cleaned that up. They've updated it, made Jesus a better Elijah. So that now they have a hero model that they can praise, so they don't have to rely on the Elijah.
I want to make one comment about modern literary criticism, and we can talk about mimesis and antiquity perhaps at a different time. Literary critics sometimes talk about a reader's mundus significans, or the plural would be the significantes. That is, we all, when we read, have cultural contexts or worlds that we bring to the text, and so we read it in the context of our world. But the world of antiquity is different from our world. It has a different mundus significans. And what we're doing is trying to embed these narratives in its native environment and not to import the text directly into our own world and its signification, but to interpret it in light of the signification of antiquity and read it alongside of and not as well as the ancients. So the idea that the New Testament was written for people in the United States who speak English in the 21st century is simply not only anachronistic, it's just stupid. And we have to understand that these people read these texts over against the cultural monuments of their ancestry, that is, the biblical traditions of Jews and the poetic traditions of Greeks, which were the monuments of ancient religion. And our ignorance, especially of the Greek side, has diminished and really crippled gospel studies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the case in point, so it's mainstream, the King's emulation in Luke. Like it's pretty much everybody accepts that that's happening, and it's by the same evidence, repetition of the same Greek words, repetition of the same order of events, it's repetition of the same meaning and interpretation of events. Details, even if they're not verbatim, they're described, basically the same things are happening. And so if you can show that and accept that for Kings, if Luke is using Kings, for example, and then here Dennis can show that the exact same techniques, exact same vocabulary for the exact same meaning, the exact same order of events, exact same sense of events. Sometimes things will be flipped, like in the case of Luke, or there's sometimes where Luke will flip the gender from something from Kings, right? So, or in the case it'll be you've done a monstrous thing will become you've done a beautiful thing. So there'll be flips, but they'll still be exact flips. So that's like improbable by itself. And the flip, of course, is usually the meaning of like something that they want to do to improve the text. So if that is accepted and is for the way that Luke is using the Septuagint, and he has the exact same evidence for Mark, for example, using Homer, and it lines up the same way, it's the same technique, it's the exact same thing, there's no reason to really reject it, other than your just insistence that there's no way Mark would use Homer for this. But obviously Mark would use Homer for this because he's writing Greek to readers of Greek. He's educated on Homer, as all Greek literate persons were. So, and he wants to hit both audiences. He wants to hit the Jewish audiences, but he also wants to hit the Gentile audiences. What's going to appeal to them? Like the Septuagint is clever, the way he uses the Septuagint is clever and useful, but a lot of his audience aren't going to be familiar with that, so they're not going to get the allusions or get the communication. So obviously he's going to use like some sort of well-known Greek literature. Homer's going to be the most well-known. Even the public would have heard it sung. And so even the illiterate people would know Homer from the singing of it in public and so on. If you know Greek, you definitely do.
I think the problem is they're starting with some presuppositions.
Of course.
I don't want to rabbit trail that these are not very bright authors.
Right.
Number two, they're starting with a paradigm in which the milieu is only Jewish, and they have a horrible conception of the Hellenism that was going on in that time.
And yet these texts are written in Greek, so they're clearly not for a Hebrew-speaking audience, right? Obviously, if there are Hebrew speakers who also speak or read Greek, then they're going to benefit from this as well. But obviously this is a Greek audience they're going for, which means Greek-speaking Jews and Gentiles, obviously, because Mark is a pro-Gentile text. So that's, and the case that they're stupid, quote unquote. Like when you get to the emulations of the Septuagint, you can't claim that, they're too stupid to do this when they're doing it. Like it's mainstream already accepts that they're doing it with the Septuagint and the Deuteronomy and Exodus and stuff like that. So it's obviously they're clever and they're doing it really brilliantly. Obviously this is literary artwork. So you can't just suddenly say, now they're too stupid to do it when it's Homer. No, obviously not. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that show. I have hundreds of other ones on the Patreon, letting you guys know you can help us continue doing what we're doing at MythVision Podcast. Also, you can have questions asked to the academics that I research with and I interview. Your question can be asked in a 1080p high quality video that might end up on YouTube. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to expose the cults, show these superstitions for what they are, and the errors within these texts and all of these religions to help people realize they're all man-made and that we have what it takes. All we need to do is pull together. And let me tell you something. The religious world has the financial backing that those skeptics such as myself don't have. So if you want to help and be a participant, you can for a little bit a month. It's not much. If you want to go more, you can. But like I said, this is how I can keep the lights on for MythVision.